because I was looking forward to Collision, and what we got last week, we got Collision, which top to bottom was not the greatest show in the world. There was Wardlow and Whoosy Whatsy, but it was refreshing and refreshingly different, and most of it was good. What we got this week was the same kind of energy in the main event and a couple of very good segments and more Dynamite-ish-ness to it. It felt like that to me, didn't it? That's why you said that, wasn't it?
It did. I mean, look, there are still some real positives. They began with those promos back to back, almost like the old Saturday night's main event.
Yeah.
And I thought that was a nice start. It can't be understated 2 weeks in what a breath of fresh air, but beyond that, what a great job they're doing, Kevin Kelly and Nigel McGuinness.
Yeah.
They alone make this show more tolerable than Dynamite. They are already the best announced team of the year, and we'll see how the rest of the year plays out. So those are the positives. The negatives, it began with a Chris Jericho segment that belonged on Dynamite, because immediately you're telling people who, whether fairly or not, AEW always said, like, we never really said sports-based wrestling. People who, fairly or not, believed that Collision was going to be a different tone, a different show. A lot of the shit we don't want to see will stay on Wednesday nights. They started this week's show with the epitome of a Wednesday night segment.
And unfortunately, and like you said, they started out, the cold open was the 2 8-man teams for the main event doing wrestling promos. No scripted bullshit. Sounded like wrestlers. They go into Elton John. There's energy. They come out, the new announcers, blah, blah, blah. And then Tony Schiavone's in the ring. Who will be Sting and Darby Allin's partner? And as he's introducing Sting and Darby Allin, Jericho music. And here comes Jericho and Grandpa Suzuki with no Sammy. And when they get in the ring, did you notice for the interview with Tony, Jericho had his own microphone already. And he just tells Tony to shut up and proceeds to do a monologue and ignore Tony, the interviewer in the ring, which is what they do on Wednesday. And it took forever, and it lost the momentum, and there was a lot of pauses, and they want to know who the third guy is, and blah, blah, blah. Maybe it's Mabel. And then finally, Jericho is threatening Tony Schiavone with the bat. Well, you know who it is, so tell me. And Tony's not a good actor at acting threatened because he hasn't got a lot of experience with it, because you're not supposed to take bats to the announcers. But besides that, when Sting's music starts playing, Jericho has just threatened him with a bat. Instead of taking the distraction as an opportunity to get the fuck out of there, Tony has to go, "It's Sting!" And here comes Sting and Darby. And at least Darby did the promo, telling Sammy, or, saying that Sammy doesn't need Jericho. He never needed you, blah, blah, blah. But here was the big reveal of the partner. Darby says, "Our partner, you know who it is. He beat you at the Tokyo Dome. You know who it is." And he put the microphone down and never said it. So Jericho may know, but I don't fucking know. And then out comes, again playing generic music from New Japan that sounds like the shit that WCW used to license in the early 90s. Here comes a guy in a white suit and a cape. And the people in the arena, because it's Toronto.
Stealing my look.
Well, there you go. And see, I told you not to invest in that cape factory. But it's Toronto, where the fans are the smartest of the smart, so some of them are chanting, "NATO, NATO."
Naito, not NATO.
Well, finally, the announcers have to say, "Yes, this is Tetsuya Naito." And apparently he's the one that Donald Trump was mad at, because all I used to hear was Trump wanted to fucking get rid of NATO, get rid of NATO.
No, that's NATO.
That's what I said.
Not Naito. You're confusing Naito and
No,
Naito.
Trump never said Naito. He was saying NATO.
Right.
Yeah, that's what I said.
That has nothing to do with Naito.
No, it's this guy NATO in the white suit.
No, that's Naito in the white suit.
You mean he stole this guy's suit?
Who stole his suit?
NATO. Or Naito.
Naito stole whose suit? No, there is no NATO. NATO is Naito. NATO is also an organization, North American North Atlantic. What is it? Why don't you say what it is, big guy?
It's NAFTA.
North American Free Trade Agreement. That's right.
So he walks to the ring in the white outfit, like all these guys from New Japan, they just come out and walk to the ring. There's no excitement. They don't look physically impressive. He's got a fucking offbeat Taylor. I'll give him that. And he gets in the ring and gets face to face with Jericho. And nobody says anything. And then Jericho and Grandpa Suzuki turn and get out of the ring. And that was it. And I wrote, we're 15 minutes into the show, and I'm fucking asleep. Last week, I was excited. This week, I'm asleep.
This belonged on Dynamite. If you want to make people think that it's going to be a different tone, a different kind of show, this does not belong here. I'm not exactly sure why Sammy wasn't there. They were just like, he's not here tonight. Okay, I don't know if there's anything to read into that. Naito's good. He's really good. I haven't seen him in a while. But a lot of these guys I used to watch in New Japan looked a lot older than they used to when they came out. Now, of course, we all get older. But after a while, I don't know. You know what the other thing is? If you don't know who any of these guys are, it just seems like everyone in New Japan now, it's all just a wacky hairdo.
There you go. Another guy with funny hair.
Every single New Japan guy that shows up, it's always the hairdo.
Inoki looked completely different from Fujinami, who looked completely different from fucking Kobayashi, who looked completely dead, and Jumbo looked obviously different than Baba. But, everybody had their own thing going. Now they just want goofy haircuts. Anyway, Miro is still highly upset with God, but it sounds good on the promos.
He announced he was atheist. That was a first on wrestling TV. He denounced his wife, his God, and everything else.
But he sounds like he's got things figured out now. No more Pip Sabian. That's the most important thing. But I like the pre-tapes. He sounds ominous with his delivery. He looks like a beast. It just... I would love for when somebody writes the tell-all book of all the stupid shit that has gone on in AEW since the start. Was it Miro's idea to come in as Pip's friend, a benefactor to Minnie Mouse and all that hoo-ha that ruined our opinion of him that we didn't have to begin with because I hadn't seen him anywhere else? And then this was hiding there, or was it? Did Tony force it on him? Did he think it was a good idea? Is he best friends with little Pip? What was the cause of all that? I've got to know one day. You know what I need to know today?
No.
Brian?
No.
Again, I defer to you as the Japanese expert. The next match was Swerve versus Tanahashi. Explain to me. And I'm sure we have reviewed a Tanahashi match at some point. I think we watched Twinkle Toes in the Tokyo Dome one time, and we've seen a couple of these crossover promotions. I don't remember any of the matches, which indicates what a impact they made on me. But can you explain to me, by watching this match between Tanahashi and Swerve Strickland, how anybody that has never seen Tanahashi before is supposed to think that he's worth, as Mama Cornette used to say, a tinker's dam?
I have seen great Tanahashi matches. His matches with Okada were, before anyone talked about Omega and Okada, it was all about Tanahashi and Okada. He was one of the people that really kept New Japan going. for several of the lean years. With that said, he looked old.
Mm-hmm.
And this match was not particularly impressive.
This match was the least not good match, or least good match, or...
This match was bad, and all I'm thinking is, how the fuck is MJF going to work with this guy? I had a little bit of optimism just based on things I've seen in the past, but after watching this guy in Swerve, and again, Swerve and MJF are very different workers, and I also think more than likely MJF will try to find a way to work around.
Oh, he'll be smarter about it, but what have you got to work with?
He looks broken down from the last time I had seen him, yeah.
Again, I said, okay, let's see this superstar get over here on American television with a live audience. Let's see him tear the house down or, make an impact or whatever. At one point, he did a crossbody, got up, pantomime taking something off of himself and handing it to Swerve, and then played air guitar. And then I wondered, is Tanahashi injured? Because does he walk like that or run like that normally, or was he limping?
I think he has years of Japanese wrestling mileage on his body. And
okay,
like I said, he didn't always move like that, but he is 46.
Does that explain why his strikes look like shit, such as forearms or punches if he attempted them?
No.
So, I understand Tanahashi's on the pay-per-view. I don't understand why, but I understand he's on it, so they got to promote it. So, couldn't they have given this guy a 5-minute win over Griff Garrison or any fucking body to promote the pay-per-view instead of sacrificing Swerve Strickland by having him do a job to a guy that looks like he just was in a car wreck? And being in a bad match that did... Let me ask you this. If you've never seen Tanahashi and you're on the fence about buying the pay-per-view, but Tanahashi versus MJF, after seeing this, did this match sell you the pay-per-view?
Oh, no.
Oh, no. So why do this? And the finish was that Tanahashi climbed up to the top rope and then slipped off the top rope and didn't fall went down to his feet on the apron, climbed back up, they fought on the turnbuckle, and then he knocked Swerve off and gave him a shitty frog splash. In this company, that was the lowest frog splash I've ever seen. Every job guy does one. Boom, but this 1, 2, 3. And I wrote, this was a Wednesday night match if I've ever seen one. And we were 30 minutes into the show at this point. And then MJF bops up on the screen and he says, I've told Tony that I insist on being first match on the pay-per-view. And now I know why. Because even with that pre-show, 4 matches or whatever, they're going to be 5th. And MJF against this guy cannot follow 12 more fucking matches where they'll have seen everything, including all the shit that Tanahashi apparently ain't going to be able to do because he needs to be in a body cast. Your thoughts?
I don't want to say disappointed. I didn't like the match. Didn't make me want to see more Tanahashi. I think Swerve's impressive, but they just seem to not want to do anything with him.
He made Swerve look bad. Made Swerve look clumsy.
And again, I can't understand or explain how they've been booking Swerve if he's someone who they want to do something with. I guess the positive is whatever fans showed up there and they sold out for the pay-per-view, they did not sell out for a Collision. A lot of those fans were the fans who knew who Tanahashi was. And they were a very forgiving audience because they were able to react to his high fly flow, which is his frog splash.
Oh boy. Take the word high out of it.
But it didn't look good, and he didn't look good. And we'll see how that pay-per-view match goes. That'll be something.
And you're right. These are the most dedicated of the dedicated because they sold out the pay-per-view in the same building the following night and then added this later. That's why the tickets were dribbling and then all the confusion to whether Punk was going to be there. And then, of course, this audience was the one predisposed not to like him because these are the people that were predisposed not to like Punk to begin with, because these are the people that don't have to worry about spending their money on their children or their wives or girlfriends because they don't have any of those. They just worship the buckaroos. So we had a small, vociferous audience. The next match, what did you think of Andrade and our friend Brody King from the House of Blech?
I didn't like it as much as I liked the Buddy Matthews match last week.
Brody ain't nobody, is he? And nobody cares for me.
You know, the other thing is, in an era when everyone is just tatted up, you don't really stand out anymore when you're just a big guy with tattoos. Everyone has them. The Vikings have them over here, and this guy has them over here. Everyone has them.
No, you know why he stands out?
No.
Because between the zebra print on his gear and the tattoos on the rest of his body that shows besides his gear, he looks like one of those goddamn kaleidoscope things that hypnotize you. If somebody was just to hang him by a rope and turn him around and around, you could fucking hypnotize the entire audience.
Well, I don't know if it achieved that goal here.
The audience seemed like they were in a trance.
They really are doing an Andrade House of Black feud, it appears. Malachi couldn't make it, but his mystical powers are able to fuck with the lighting system somehow.
You know what? They were in Canada. Wonder what Malachi has back in his criminal record. Wonder about Sammy.
Oh, Sammy's on the paper. Isn't Sammy on the pay-per-view?
I don't know. I'm just making shit up.
All right. Well, listen, Mr. Making Things Up.
Well, if somebody don't go to Canada, sometimes there's things wrong.
I was already in a pretty sour mood about this show just because it opened feeling like Dynamite. The Tanahashi match felt like the kind of thing you would see on Dynamite, and it wasn't impressive. Andrade had that good match last week. Did they go as long this week? It felt like they went as long this week, and it just wasn't the same match. I didn't like it as much.
That's the thing. Maybe if they'd had the matches in reverse order, because both these guys worked hard and they were serious about it. There was some modern bullshit going on. But they were they didn't go out on the floor endlessly. They didn't bury the referee. You can tell that the in-ring matches on this program are trying to be serious as opposed to the indie bullshit that Wednesday does. But the problem is Brody King ain't Buddy Matthews. Brody King's a big guy, and he's got a lot of tattoos cover up the fact he doesn't have any muscles. But Buddy has oomph to him. We've talked about his work and just his oomph and his look. Brody King is kind of big and kind of bleh, and his facials are kind of and he doesn't really have a third gear. He's like an indie version of Buddy Matthews. So they had the match last week, and it was a lot better than this one. I wrote, this one has gone on too long, just some flat-footed back and forth, and Brody is nobody, is what I wrote. And then Andrade got the figure 4 and was going to, do the bridge for the figure 8, and Julia Hart got up on the apron with Andrade's mask that he wears to the ring, that he then takes off for his match. So Andrade has the finishing hold on the guy, but he lets go with the figure 4 and gets up and asks for his mask, just stands there looking. If you can't hit a girl and she's got your shit, aren't you going to go and snatch it away from her? You don't have to knock her out, but you're going to snatch your shit. He just stands there, then turns back around and ducks a clothesline and gets the figure 4 back on Brody. And then that's when Buddy hits. That's another reason why their names are too confusing, Brody and Buddy. And he gets disqualified. And that finish was performed in pretty much the most perfunctory way that it could be done. But then Buddy and Brody both beat up Andrade, and the corpse referee, the useless boy, he was the fucking referee, so he just jumps out on the floor and makes faces, and nobody comes to help. And Malachi Black's face pops up on the screen, and the heels stare at him, and then the lights go out, and the announcers start pitching to the fucking matches we're going to see later on. This was, again, Wednesday night bullshit with their appearing, disappearing, lights out. wax on, wax off, the clapper, whatever the fuck.
Yeah, no, I'm sold on Buddy Matthews. They should get him away from this, somehow give him a new name or a gimmick that you're not denying who he once was, but he's become a different person. Maybe Buddy freaking Matthews? I don't know. But no, seriously, just do something else with him because he's good and he's dragged down by this nonsense. You saw him say to Julia when to put up the mask. So you even got to see that spot get called. Andrade's the babyface, I guess?
Yeah.
Is Andrade the reason Sammy's not there?
I don't know. Oh, that's right. I forgot. Could it be that Andrade said, I'll punch him again if I get the chance.
If you make me go to Canada, I'm going to punch Sammy Guevara.
Yeah. God damn it. All righty. Anyway, the top of the 9 o'clock hour on this program, and I really was looking forward to this. And I told Stace last week, this is a program that I might start watching as it happens on a Saturday evening, rather than knowing ahead of time I'm going to want to fast forward through a lot of shit. But now we're 50-50. We're 1-1. Anyway, top of the 9 o'clock hour, Tony introduces Christian Cage and Dino Douche. And even though Christian actually knows how to work with an interviewer, even though he has to boost Tony's arm up, Tony gets tired and the microphone starts drooping. But Christian, I think he and Punk, I wouldn't mind if they just did dueling 30-minute promos. One guy go 30, the other guy go 30, then the other guy tag back in, do 2 hours that way. I don't know that I'd mind that as bad as I do these normal programs, because he can fucking talk. And nobody wrote this shit for him. And he's doing it brilliantly. And he savaged his hometown of Toronto. And then, and the heelish demeanor of him and the big goof in the back. And Christian has the belt over his shoulder, even though the dinosaur won it. And he acts like he's the champion. That was great stuff. But the best line was, Tony, I left the show last week in a really bad mood. Because you know this story, right? The bad mood quote? Or have you even heard about this?
I don't know.
Last week, after Collision got raves by us and many people, and it was actually a wrestling program rather than their normal caca, Uncle Dave tweeted out or printed in something, whatever, it was a quote from him, that he talked to one top star who went home in a bad mood from the show and said it's like a ticking time bomb with him there. Something's going to happen eventually. Talking about Punk. And so Christian, to make fun of that stupidity, that, I left the show last week in a really bad mood. But can you believe they're still trying
What has happened to Dave? I can't explain it. I really can't.
They're still trying it. And somebody on Twitter said, why did Jericho leave the show in a bad mood? Did somebody ask him where his wife was on January 6th? But anyway, again, and as this audience they had here shows, they've gotten to the core group of the Buckaroo Banzai fans to poison them against Punk.
Don't ruin Buckaroo Banzai and associate it with the Young Bucks.
All right. But anyway, they're still trying. And especially because they saw that at least last week, and in his segments especially, Punk puts on a television program that a wrestling fan can stomach watching. Instead of just a fucking, either a 10-year-old mentally or a 40-year-old virgin. They had interviews with all of the... Oh, I'm sorry. Did you have any comments about Christian's promo?
Nah, it was fine.
Well, thank you for summing that up.
Not looking forward to seeing more of them feuding with Wardlow. So,
oh, God, no. No, I just want to hear Christian talk. And if they can keep the dinosaur just standing back there as window dressing without having to see him work, that'll be a plus. But they did then do a promo package where we had comments from everybody in the Owen Hart tournament. And again, Kojima, I guess, is going to wrestle Punk. The way that I'm seeing this, unless there are major upsets, and I'm not talking about a major upset in terms of we're trying to get this young superstar over an established veteran to further his career. I'm talking about a major upset in the sense of how the fuck would they think that was a good idea to book that fucking finish? The final's going to be Samoa Joe and CM Punk, and I'm all in favor of that. Hopefully, just because I've stooged this obviousness, they won't change it. But anyway, then on this program, we had Nyla Rose against Willow Nightingale. And Marina Shafir is now Nyla Rose's manager. How many has she had now?
2. Vicky Guerrero.
Well, didn't Vicky went away and then she was in some other group, wasn't she? Or had somebody else with her?
Did she ever have Mark Sterling as her manager?
Something like that. I don't know. It's
Stokely? I don't know.
Stokely Carmichael, possibly.
Stokely Hathaway.
Him too.
Whatever happened to him?
Well, his wife Jane was the breadwinner in that family. Anyway, we had that match, and then I was once again a small grain of hope, optimism, smoking the hopium. Powerhouse Hobbs came to the ring without QT Marshall, and there was no mention of QT Marshall in conjunction with Hobbs. Did you hear anything?
No, and that was the brightest thing about this whole segment, was the idea that maybe they got Hobbs finally away from QT.
And just on his own, if they don't want to give him a legitimate manager, then just let him be on his own. He either needs a legitimate, well, which there is none in that company anyway, manager to elevate him, or he needs to be on his own, do his own talking, and do exactly what he did here 4 years late. They start everybody out in competitive dream matches, and 4 years later, they finally get a win in a squash, but he beat Jeremy Prophet in seconds in a dominant fashion, and that's exactly what it should have been. And except for the main event, that was the whole program, and that's why we were, Brian and I'm speaking to the greater assemblage of listeners out there, why we were downtrodden and downhearted and kind of bummed out by what we thought was going to be a kind of a guaranteed bright spot after last week on Saturday nights. But they brought it up at the end. Should we go into the main event, Brian?
Please. It was actually good.
An 8-man tag team match. We've gotten away from the 6-man tags. Now we're going to, and now if they call the 6-man tags trios, does that mean this is a quattro or quadraphonic?
Well, definitely not quadraphonic. That would be with the sound.
Okay, then it's got to be a quattro, right?
I guess it could be.
See, that's how silly trios is, to call a 6-man tag match a trios match.
But would it be quattros? It's not trio, it's trios. So would it be quattros match?
That's what I said, a quattros match.
Oh, I thought you said quattro singularly.
Well, whatever it may be. The point is, and then if they have a 10-man like the Anarchy in the Arena, is that going to be a quintos? Might better just use the goddamn numbers.
What about quartet match?
Well, that would be a tag.
A quartet match?
Yeah.
Well, your tag team, your team is the quartet.
No. The whole match is the quartet.
Well, why does that have to be the rules?
And then give one of them a violin and the other one an oboe and the other one a guitar. You'd have a string quartet.
I'll take the guy with the oboe.
Well, I used to know a guy played an old oboe. Used to play it across his knee. Play me a song, Curtis Lowe, Curtis Lowe. All right, anyway.
These are the breaks, Curtis Blow, Curtis Blow.
No. Curtis Lowe, not Curtis Blow. The Ballad of Curtis Lowe by Leonard Skinner. Play me a song, Curtis Lowe, Curtis Lowe. I wish that you his everyone would know.
Come on, you're upsetting people.
All righty then. So the 8-man tag was the Gun Boys and Gin and Juice against Ricky Starks, FTR, and CM Punk. And they did all these separate entrances and saved Punk's for last. And then you heard, like Mussolini, with cheers and boos. And everybody was standing. Some people were cheering. Some people were flipping birds and going, fuck you, fuck you. And then the people that were cheering tried to drown out the people that were booing, and vice versa. And now they have made it to where that Punk is now not only the biggest babyface, but then also the biggest heel in the company. And it wasn't the EVP's plan with their slander campaign after they got their panties in an uproar because Tony wouldn't powder their pussies by firing the guy that kicked the shit out of them after they put the mouth on him, slandered him, and then instigated a physical confrontation that they were not equipped to handle. And he has done absolutely nothing, he being Tony, to punish the officers of his company who have devalued one of his assets and basically come out and told the most dedicated part of his audience, do not like this guy, don't support this guy, and don't watch this guy even though he's in our company. Because we're mad and he's a bad person. But now the guy that was universally being cheered at, and he's still an attraction. Punk is still at, because now he's the most controversial person in wrestling, because he's the only person that in the business that can get the biggest positive reaction and the biggest negative reaction on the shows that he's on. But it wasn't the EVP's plan to make him attractive in that way. It was their plan to poison him to their fan base so that they wouldn't want to see him. And Tony would spend the millions of dollars that he's paying Punk unnecessarily throwing it down a well because he couldn't get his full value out of Punk because he'd been poisoned to the fans. That's what the EVP's tried to do. And it still remains to be seen whether it's going to affect, is it going to affect his merchandise business? And the merchandise he sells, are the AEW faithful going to buy Punk's merchandise like they were? That's going to cost Tony money. Are they going to come to buy tickets on Saturday nights, much as the people who like wrestling and want to see a program that makes sense and is not pointed at and written for and catered to children and childish minds? They don't want to go on Wednesday now. They want to go on Saturday. But that wasn't Punk telling them don't support the Wednesday night show. That's just demonstrably we're going to get wrestling on Saturdays, hopefully, rather than childish trampoline cowboy bullshit. So is Tony going to do anything about these motherfuckers that he's paying more money to than they've ever seen in their lives, and more money than any of them deserve from a wrestling promoter for their limited talent that they possess? Talking about Hangnail and Maddie and Nikki and Old Twinkle Toes and their assorted crew that's even less valuable than they are. How long is Tony going to pay them all that money while they continue to do nothing but cost Tony money by devaluing things he invests in? So the people, every time Punk gets in, the booers want to boo him, then the cheers want to out-cheer the booers, and then the booers want to out-boo the cheers, and it gets a reaction, but it's needless and unnecessary. All that Maddie and Nikki had to do was take their ass kicking that they asked for and get over it like men. That's all they had to do. Anyway, like last week, this match was the in-ring work and general professionalism was way up compared to anything else on this show or anything else in this company. This is the kind of match that the Guns need to be in to learn, because they're opposite guys that know what they're doing, pacing and fucking execution and etc. And again, with FTR and Punk in a match, it looks and feels like a wrestling program. And Jen and Juice are holding their own every step of the way. I love Juice Robinson. And the Guns they have such promise, and they're so animated, and they work so hard, but they need direction that these guys who are more experienced and more talented than the Guns' normal opponents gave them. And the match, it moved at 100 miles an hour for a long time, but it flew by because they kept it fresh. It made sense. They didn't bury the referee. Everybody was tagging in and out. There was no extended floor fights. Was there a dive in this fucking thing? Thank God I don't think I saw one. Yes, Cash did the dive at the end and the finish when everybody went crazy. Cash did a dive, and it looked like he killed his opponents and him too.
Himself, yeah.
Yeah. So it was a goddamn wrestling match instead of a bunch of guys on a trampoline jacking off, like the California contingent. And then, again, the match made sense. They got heat on Punk. And finally, he made the hot tag to Starks. He made a nice comeback. That's when it broke down into an 8-way, and some guys went to the floor. And Cash did the dive that he almost overshot the barricade and everything. But it was during the big build to the finish and the blow-off of everything. That's when all the big shit happened. And then Starks hits a spear on everybody. But as he ends up through the ropes head first, Juice nailed him from the floor, and he spun into Jay White's finish. Boom. 1, 2, 3. So now the heels have won. And holy shit, where are we going to go from here? Great match again for a main event. Unfortunately, most of this program felt like Dynamite instead of what we got last week from Collision, but you can see that they're trying, with Hobbs getting a decisive win, with Miro getting a short promo where he just, gets his new gimmick over, with the main event delivering in the ring, with even the matches that weren't very good, not just doing all the bullshit that happens on Wednesday night. You can tell they're trying to make this show different. But they do apparently need a better line of demarcation crossed in the sand on what talent is going to be allowed on this program.
Well, there's the problem. How much of this is going to be an ongoing problem whenever there's a pay-per-view the next day and everyone's in town at the same time?
And Tony forces, and I understand there's financial reasons. You've got a national television show and you want to plug the pay-per-view you've got the next day. It's not Collision's fault that the pay-per-view has a bunch of matches nobody gives a shit about except for the people who would buy it just to see New Japan's Howie the mailroom guy. Just random people, but that's why I'm sure he did a lot of this, because it's the night before the pay-per-view and they wanted to push it. But they're going to be preempted on Saturday nights. And Saturday night is always the night before the pay-per-view. So if Collision is going to be a good show, except the night before a pay-per-view, or except when it's preempted, we might not be able to find it. That's going to be a handicap to overcome. I wish they'd switch nights. Wednesday, they never fucking move anywhere. Can't we have the good show on Wednesday and the shitty show on Saturday? Anyway, we collided with Collision. They're batting 500 so far with 2 winners of a main event.
You know what? I like the energy for the Punk match. I know it's not perfect. In a perfect world, he wouldn't have his reputation and whatever value to AEW diminished however much it's been diminished by, can't even call it a whisper campaign anymore, the campaign to destroy him. But the John Cena-esque reaction,
yeah,
I like that. And I think the one thing John Cena showed is it doesn't drive people away. You know, that's the kind of thing I'm sure his merch will be great still. And you're going to get this kind of weird reaction in certain towns.
With Cena, you weren't dealing with a subset of a niche audience. You were dealing with what was still if the WWE audience is 3 times now what AEW's was, during Cena's heyday 15 years ago, it was 3 times what WWE's audience is now. That was a lot of people, and there was plenty to go around. The people that liked him, the people that didn't like him. Kids would buy his shit, grown men would boo him, whatever. It was great reaction, but it didn't hurt business. But when you're talking about a much smaller group of people that are AEW followers, you've got your base audience that likes the trampoline cowboys. You've got some significant portion of other people that just like to watch all kinds of wrestling. And then you've got the, couple 100,000 or however many it is that Punk brings because they were wrestling fans and they'll follow Punk, but they haven't been particularly paying that much attention to what's going on these days since he was gone. And you can't really afford to run any of those off. Now, it's not bad for Punk besides his reputation being slandered by these nimrods. He still gets the same amount of money. He's on contract. And as we said, now he's the hottest guy on both sides of the roster. He's going to get more reaction, positively or negatively, than anybody else on the card. But again, if I was Tony Khan, I would run these fucking vice presidents over with a car. That they worked this hard and this long and right under my nose without me having the balls to do anything about it, to poison people from spending money on or wanting to see or pay attention to the biggest star that Tony Khan has in his company because of jealousy. And I can't believe he doesn't take a stick to these motherfuckers.
Not just the EVPs.
No, all of their associated friends and.
Well, beyond that, Jericho. We heard about some of the things Jericho said.
Well, I put Jericho in that friend and hanger-on camp now because hello, fellow kids. He wants to be with the fucking. The problem is now. Jericho wants to be with the young kids. Well, the young kids 40 years ago were the ones in wrestling doing all the fucking drinking and drugs and partying and carousing and getting in trouble and kicked out of hotels, all the shit that Jericho's doing now when he's 60. And the kids that are 20 now, they're playing video games and diddling themselves in their hotel room because they don't want to get outed for actually going out and trying to get laid. So that's some kind of goddamn time warp there with old Chris, isn't it?
Yeah, they want to go play video games, and meanwhile, Dr. Roxo's getting kicked out of the hotel.
Hey, Derek. But anyway, so yeah, when you were going to make a thought about, I can't believe Tony hadn't taken a stick to these people for costing him money.
I was just going to say, in terms of the slander of CM Punk, it wasn't just the Young Bucks and their friends. Don't forget there were other people in the company who saw Punk as a threat for one reason or another. But just to focus on the positives here, I'm hoping next week's Collision, without pay-per-view the next day, maybe you won't have a lot of the people you don't want to see on that show. Kevin Kelly and Nigel McGuinness, though.
Yeah.
Make a lot more of the stuff watchable.
And by the way, next week, Dynamite and Collision, are they not both in Hamilton, Ontario?
That's right. Hamilton, Ontario, Canada.
So approximately a fifth of the number of people that were booing and or cheering for Punk on Collision from Toronto will be there to boo him and cheer him in Hamilton. They're doing both shows back to back. One's, I guess, Wednesday's live, Thursday's tape, right?
I think
Collision.
I think so. I don't know.
Well, that's easy.
I thought Collision was going to be live every week. I didn't realize it was already
No, they're taping it in some. I guess because they can't get into Hamilton on Saturday. Hamilton's closed on Saturday. But point being, they're going to have small crowds in the same building 2 nights in a row to see 2 hopefully very different television programs. We'll see what happens. And that was Collision. And we don't have the ratings because it's fucking Sunday.
That's right, and that's your show.